Buying good companies, buying companies that have good news, this makes a lot of good sense. And yet it's one of the mistakes that many traders make that costs them money. And this week I'll explain why, and then I'll do my analysis of the markets. We'll get a sense of where the stock, commodity, currency markets are likely to go. And then finally, I'll look at the trade of the week on LUNR. So I learned a long time ago, and I learned it the hard way, that trading with common sense, investing with common sense, can often lead to losses. Because most people think that they simply have to do what makes sense. In other words, a company announces that they've discovered a cure for cancer, buy the stock. A company announces that they've discovered a new gold mine, buy the stock. What they don't realize, however, is that these stocks move up before the news comes out. And that's why, even though it makes common sense to buy these stories, it's actually often a losing trade. Let me give you an example of something that happened this past week. You may have heard of a company called Intuitive Machines. The symbol is LUNR, and I'm going to show you the trade on this at the end of the video. On LUNR, they launched a lunar lander into space. They landed the lunar lander on the moon, which was great news. They met their objective, and yet the stock went down after they achieved what they were setting out to do. Now before that, and again, you'll see this at the end of the video, before that the stock went up from $2 to $12. And so that's really the key, is that these stocks move up in anticipation of good news. The market tends to price in things before they happen. And so by the time the news comes out, it's often too late. The speculators, the people who are guessing what the news will be, well, they push the stock up before the announcement of the news. And this happens with companies like Intuitive Machines, but it also happens with biotech stocks, with commodity stocks, with companies releasing earnings. They often move up before the news comes out. And once the speculators are done, well, then the stock moves lower. Here you see the chart of Lunar Machines, LUNR, and the news came out right here. This was, they landed on the moon after the close on, I guess it was Thursday. And then Friday morning, they gapped up. These are the people buying the news, right? The good news. And look what the stock did from there. It moved down through the day. That's why this candle is red, because it opened up here just under $12 and it closed the day down here just under 10. What's important to notice is that this stock started moving up about a month ago, right here, and then a big jump here, and a big jump here. This all in anticipation of them landing their machine on the moon. I'm going to show you at the end of the video the right way to trade this stock, the point where it was time to buy, and also the point where it was time to sell. But the point I really want to make is that buying the news is a bad idea. You buy the rumor, you sell the news. And it happens over and over again. Rookie traders buy the news and then get punished because they fail to realize that the news was priced in well in advance of its announcement. All right, let's take a look at the overall markets, figure out what happened last week, where the markets are likely to go. I'm going to start this week, as I always do, with the S&P 500. And so here is a 30-day, 30-minute chart of the S&P 500, basically a one-month chart. And you can see that the general trend is up. The bottoms are rising, the buyers are in control, so that's an optimistic chart. Sentiment Stockscores at 82, which is quite high. When you look at the 3-year chart of the S&P, you see that it's in a very steep, steady upward trend. I would say the market is risky because it's gone up so much, but there's really no sign of a breakdown yet. You know, upward trends typically end when the upward trend line is broken after the build of a falling top. So right here, that was the strong signal to sell before the market moved down through most of 2022. We don't have that yet. Even though the market is risky, it's hitting new highs. There is no break of the upward trend, and there is no falling top yet. So if you're long of stocks, stay long. I wouldn't chase the market here, but individual stocks still have lots of potential. I'll explain why in a moment. And it really comes down to this S&P chart not representing most of the market. Now let's move along to the NASDAQ, QQQ. Here is the intraday chart. You can see the trend here again, basically up. The 3-year chart in a strong upward trend. So no reason to sell, but a bit of a chase to buy it here. You know, you want to buy the break of downward trend lines from a rising bottom, like happened there, or the break of pullbacks in the upward trend, like happened there. But you don't want to chase the market when it's run up so much. Let's take a look at the IWM, and this is the chart that tells the greater story of what's going on in the market. This index, the Russell 2000, represents 2,000 companies, and it's not dominated by any small number of companies like the NASDAQ and S&P indexes are. Now here you can see the trend is slightly up. If we look at the 3-year trend, you see it's more or less sideways. It's hitting resistance, and this really represents what most stocks are doing, which is not a lot. If you're not looking at Amazon, Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, Meta, those are the stocks that are led the market higher. They're the ones who make that S&P index look so good. But meanwhile, most stocks are pretty boring, but they are improving. And you can see that because we've got rising bottoms building, and we're knocking on the door of resistance that is held up many times over the last couple of years. So now all we need is to break out through this. Now, what's going to motivate this market to break out? Well, I'll show you in a minute. Let's move along to the Canadian market first. And here it is. And again, this is the short-term chart, really what happened over the last 20 trading days. And you can see the market generally moving up, but quite volatile, quite choppy. On the 3-year chart, you see we are in an upward trend on the Canadian market as well, but certainly not as strong as the S&P or as the NASDAQ. It's going to run into resistance up here. The trend is up, and I expect it'll get there and get stuck. Let's take a look at commodities now. Gold, GLD, had a bad couple of weeks. This past week, it actually started to rebound a little bit. So it's looking better in the short term, but I would still call this a neutral chart because the trend is generally sideways. On the 3-year time frame, you can see that the long-term trend is up, but it's got a lot of volatility. It moves around a lot. I think we may see it move up a little bit in the short term toward these highs. So traders might find some opportunities on the buy side in gold. Well, how about oil? USO is the symbol. And there you can see the trend over the last couple of weeks was up. On Friday, that was broken. It's definitely a negative signal what happened on Friday. It's not the end of the world because it comes off of a new high on this chart as opposed to a falling top. And when we look at the 3-year chart, we see that we've been trying to break this downward trend. You could argue we've done so, not with a lot of enthusiasm yet, but it is definitely improving. You can see the Stockscores have moved above 60 again after being negative for a few months. So I think the oil market is improving. I wouldn't say it's a rush out and buy it just yet, but I am starting to see some improvement in the oil charts. Let's take a look at the US dollar. UUP is the symbol. And there you can see the trend is generally up over the last month, but down over the last 5 or 6 days. There will be a reason for this. I'll show you in just a moment. Here's the 3-year chart. It's generally up, although in the last year it's been choppy and sideways. It had this big gap, but if you take that out, it's essentially just stuck in this sideways range. How about Bitcoin? It's been one of the hot areas to trade. Here is the 1-month chart, the short-term view, and it's been pausing over the last week, taking a little break. But on the 3-year time frame, it is still in its very strong upward trend. Now, if you've been watching these videos every week, you'll know that I went bullish on Bitcoin right back here because that's when it broke from a rising bottom, having broken the downward trend line, and we've been bullish ever since. Good reason to subscribe to these videos every week because I do this analysis every week and it's free and you'll get these messages when they happen. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I know a lot of people watch this every week and they're not subscribed, and I would appreciate it if you were. All right, TLT, that's the important chart I wanted to watch or look at this week because it explains why maybe we're seeing the US dollar come down a little bit the last few days, because the bond market went sideways and then on Friday it went up. Now this is very important because if the bond market goes up, that means interest rates have come down. Now this is very short term right now. However, when we look at the 3-year chart, we see that there is the potential to break this downward trend line from a rising bottom. So we could have, if we had 2 good up weeks in a row, we might break this downward trend line. That would be supportive for stocks in general, particularly those small cap stocks that make up the Russell 2000, the IWM chart that I showed you earlier. And this may be the thing that causes the rest of the market to catch up to those large cap tech stocks that have pulled the S&P higher, pulled the NASDAQ higher. Again, it hasn't happened yet. I just try to give you things to watch for. If it does happen, of course, let's say it happens next week, you'll hear about it here in this video, weekly video. But for now, that's what you want to watch out for. So let's look at my ratings then. Bullish on both time frames for US large cap stocks and the NASDAQ. Small cap, bullish in the short term, but still neutral in the long term. We haven't broken out through resistance yet. Canadian stocks, bullish on both time frames. Gold, neutral. Oil, short-term bullish, long-term neutral. US dollar, short-term bullish, but long-term neutrals. Bitcoin, bullish on both time frames. And you can see there I still have a bearish rating on bonds on both time frames, but that could easily change next week because of what happened on Friday. I think there's some good potential that the market will bounce back in the bond market next week, which means interest rates come down, which will be supportive for stocks. There is a trickle down effect, and that tends to make the market move up well from here until May or June. February is typically a bit of a dull month for the market. January can be good, February soft, and then rallies into May and June. January wasn't that great this year. February was neutral-ish, and now starting to see things improving. So we'll see how that pans out. All right, now I want to take a look at the trade of the week. I promised at the top of the video we would go back to LUNR and I'd show you the time to buy, the time to sell, long before the news came out, long before their lunar lander hit the surface of the moon. So here it is. I always look for stocks trading abnormally. So the speculators got excited again right here, and this of course was in anticipation of the mission to the moon. It started to trade abnormally on the 15th of February, breaking this downward trend line on the 13-minute chart, making a Stockscores action candle right there. And so in our active live service at Stockscores, that was one of the calls I made to our participants in our active live service. LUNR was a swing trade there. So then where is the sell point? Well, there's something on this chart called a bursting bubble. When you get a stock that moves up and it starts to curve, starts to go parabolically higher, then when you hit a new high, but close below the open on a candle, so this 13-minute period and the opening 13 minutes of February 21st, it hit a new high at the open, but moved down from the open in a parabolic trend. That was the strong sell signal. I call that a bursting bubble. I only apply it when a trend goes parabolic, when it's really exciting upward move. It's often the time when a lot of, I'm going to call them rookie traders, are chasing the stock higher because of emotion. And it's usually when the bubble bursts, when the crowd is all there, gathered around, exciting, pushing the stock perhaps irrationally higher. The bubble bursts and price starts to retrace. I think we've probably seen the short-term highs on this stock, not 100%, but probably 80% chance. We've seen the short-term highs in LUNR because the speculation is gone for a while. The market moved up in anticipation of news. The news came out, it's over. No more reason to speculate. Those speculative traders will move on to the next story. We'll see what that is. Always look for abnormal activity. That's your clue that something's happening. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. Again, if so, click on the like button. I appreciate it. Hit the like or hit the subscribe. And most importantly, trade well.